The Three Tomatoes film series celebrates women over 40 with films that entertain, enlighten, and build a bridge between generations. Your series launched in LA on September 19th with a second screening in New York City. Here are highlights of the panel discussion after the film from the New York City screening.
The women of the class of 1969 took the 60s to heart. We fought for a freedom, only to find that often it was far from free. These are some of our highly creative graduation photos, the triggers for this movie. And this is our story, graphic, intense, poignant, funny, and a window on a whole generation.
Achievement in my family was very important. So it's hard to remember back that long, but there was never a time in my life where I thought I wouldn't be on my own doing something creative work-wise. I do understand the whole ring by spring thing. I did get married at a very young age. It worked out. I never got a ring, but I did, find the right person, but I always wanted to be a worker and be productive, and that was always very, very important to me. And as Liz said, I think there was a real split in the class. I was sort of on the left wing of that split and very much involved in the counterculture, although I was a very serious student. I really did embrace this new wave of social change.
So Peter, I'm going to call you out a little bit as being the only man on the panel, and I think kind of what stood out for me in the movie, and probably everybody here in the audience, is that very first scene, if you remember the woman in the purple dress, and they asked her about the word freedom and what that meant to her, and she kind of broke down. So as a filmmaker, how did you react to that, and as a man, how did you react to that?
Well, well, it's interesting. We went through a lot of back and forth about that scene. It was felt that starting the movie with somebody weeping might not have been a good idea, might have been a turnoff. For me, having been trained as a dramatist, that was gold, because we used this very evocative word, freedom, and twisted it, turned it. Freedom wasn't such a happy thought for this woman. Why was that? Well, the whole movie sort of answers that question. And it's interesting being a man to some degree in a women's world. I have two daughters. One, when she was little, used to say, I have the biggest feelings in the world. And she used to give me the compliment of saying that I have the second biggest feelings. And I treasure that. And I think my response to interviewees carries a lot of unspoken emotion. I hear very intensely. So it's a long answer, but that's what that line meant to me. And we followed that theme all the way through the movie, freedom.
We have three strong women up here, obviously, from that 60s movement. It was a very, turmoil of times with Vietnam and feminism. But did you realize at the time that you were going through the feminist movement and identify then? I mean, obviously now, you're speaking out, but did you realize then?
I certainly realized when I left college and came to New York and tried to get a job, after doing incredibly well in college, getting straight A's and being given typing tests, and which I couldn't type, So not that, I was shocked by that. I was going to say, not that I was shocked by that, but it also was a time where I had very, very good friends, and there was this foment, a spirit of possibility. And there were enough like-minded women who I was fortunate enough to meet to really get involved very early as a part of the feminist movement. And one of my, since one of the things about making this movie that has been so interesting to me is that there's, you know, no surprise, but there still is this backlash against that term, which just drives me crazy, because if people don't like the word, fine, but the meaning is equality, gender equality, and you know, that's what we want for future generations. So I did understand that and was excited by being part of a movement that I found really exciting and still find very exciting.
A front row seat to the women's movement during the 60s because of your mother, Bella. And just for some of the younger women in the audience, Bella was one of the most visible and iconic leaders of the feminist movement, and was also a founder of one of the most important organizations for women called NOW. So Liz, can you give us a snapshot of what those times were like and what were the key issues and rights women were fighting for back then?
First of all, thank you. Film was great. Mom was not just, she wasn't a founder of NOW, she was a founder of the National Women's Political Caucus and was a congresswoman who, first Jewish congresswoman elected to the Congress House of Representatives in 1970.
Yeah.
Also one of the most radical congresswomen or congressmen elected. In her first month after being elected, she called for the impeachment of the president, impeachment of President Nixon over the war in Vietnam. Being at her footsteps, and the women, Gloria, as someone I was adopted by, Gloria Steinem, by my mother early on in the beginning of the movement, and watching them pull it together and try to overcome what I believe, as a professor, a lawyer, and a feminist activist myself, as one of the watershed moments of women's rights in this country, that is the 70s women's movement, was very fascinating. I was very lucky, clearly, to have the mother I had, the father I had, who was feminist before they even talked about men as feminists. And yet, my mother and I, who were very close, because I was a lawyer, she was a lawyer, and she had a great life, a great sense of a joie de vivre. In fact, she represented this district that we're sitting in here right now. She was representing the West Side, all the way down to the Village, all the way up to Riverdale. So what I have to say is that I believe we have so much more work to do. As a professor at Barton in Columbia, have to say, I'm very sad to say, and I've been up there for quite a while now, that young women, unlike you women at your 69 class, the young women at Barnard have not felt or not translated, many of them, the empowerment that we, work to give them. And a lot of ritualized apologies. I've never heard any of my male students excuse when raising their hand to say, I'm sorry, professor, but this may not be relevant, where I still hear in this 2015, young women at one of the premier women's colleges, like you guys attended, excusing themselves for asking a question. So that's why I formed the Bella Abzug Leadership Institute, to inspire middle school, high school, and college girls to inspire them to get the skills and the strategy and the politicization and the feminist belief and the debate skills to take their rightful place and to finally achieve gender equality and to grab the mantle of leadership of the women who are sitting here, my mother and many others, Ferraro, Shirley Chisholm, and others, who really had to suffer to break the barriers down. And that is, I believe that I had a responsibility not only to preserve my mother's legacy, but to bring out and help empower the younger generation of women, and I mean younger, I'm talking down to middle school, starting in middle school all the way up through post-college, to help them understand that we still have long work left to do, and we have to do a lot to achieve full equality, full gender equality, not what we've done so far.
I wanted to bring up the fact that the style of protesting, it was mentioned in the film. I thought it was very poignant, just stuck out at me, that people consider that using Facebook or social media as a really legitimate form of protest. And in my opinion, it's more of a way to get people to know about a protest so that they can go and do it in person. But I just wanted to get your input.
I tell my students at Barton and Columbia, I'm, for one, believe there's no substitution for being in the streets and looking at someone's eyes and the nuances of, you know, the body language in fact. And I think that's one of the reasons why Occupy Wall Street, by the way, was so successful, because, and I was very involved in that effort, because you were in the streets, you were connecting, you were protesting, as we did in the civil rights movement, as we did in the women's movement, as we did in the anti-war movement. And I think that there is something, there is, no matter what, in terms of social media, that innate feeling, that liveliness of understanding and being in the street and being one-to-one and hearing voices in reality and not just through, you know, a social media context, really is fundamentally very important. And I look through the history of movements, and you can see it in every movement. It's true we didn't have social media, and we haven't had an advanced technology like we do, and we need it. We absolutely need it to connect, as you have said, but we also cannot leave the other part behind. I mean, when young women say, oh, you older feminists, you do, you know, burn bras and carried on the street, you know, beat the drums. I said, well, you know, you guys, that's true, but you guys have to do some theatrical too. And at Columbia, when Emma Silkowitz walked around with a mattress to protest rape on campus, I mean, that was carried all over the world, that demonstration. So that's exactly my point.
You know, women are still being, especially young women, are still being pushed by the marketplace and the media. You know, I'm so excited when you were talking about women in film, women producers in film. You know, I'm 96% are men in the production of film. So we've got only about 4% of women that are producing films. You know, Brave was probably one of the greatest things that came out. You know, so, you know, we're starting to see some of this, but girls and young boys too are inundated with these visuals, and the marketplace continues to push and prod. Hey, I don't know about you all, but I've used those products. You know, using, you know, 7 days, lose 10 years. I don't know. I'm still waiting. I don't know about you all, but the point is that we have to wake up. I think the most important thing, and I think that's what Liz is talking about, I think that's what we're all doing here today, is that we do have to wake up. By the way, the Dalai Lama said, and I'm going to say this over and over again, he said the women of the Western world will be the agents of change for the world for better. We have such an opportunity today to make a difference. And you're right, I think this group of women and the women in this film, they get it, they understand it, but we have young women that don't get it and don't understand it. At the end of the movie, which I really also liked, was the legacy issue. For me, this is what this is in my lifetime. You know, I want to leave something behind for my daughters. I was a tomboy. I didn't, you know, I think Liz asked me, she says, well, when did you get involved in doing what you're doing? I said, well, I guess when I figured out I was a girl. And I think that's what a lot of young women have to figure out, is that they are girls, and there is still not gender equality. But I have 3 daughters. I didn't expect to have them. Now I have 7 granddaughters. I didn't expect to have them. You know, that wasn't my plan either. You know, a ring was not my plan, that's for sure. But the point is that I truly believe that in my lifetime, I want to see leadership parity. Take the Lead, which is Women Connect for Good, is partnering with, and we need to talk more about your leadership program a lot so we can get together. But our whole goal is to create leadership for women in every area, whether it's business, industry, if it's the health industry, if it's the spiritual community. But again, the only way that we're going to make a difference is, first of all, support each other. I am such a proponent of this. Every woman needs to support each other. I recently attended a conference in Orlando. It was a women's diversity conference. Probably the very best women's conference I've ever attended in my entire life. But I heard this once, and I heard this twice, and I heard this 5 times from different keynote speakers. And Madeleine Albright said this. She said, there is a special place in hell for women who do not support one another.